Part 1. First Light, Expanded Narrative. The wind whipped across the rust-colored plains of New Horizon, kicking up small clouds of ochre dust that danced around Jae-won's worn hiking boots. At 12 years old, she was already more comfortable in the wilderness than most adults in the colony. Her father, a geological surveyor, had taught her to navigate the harsh landscape since she could walk. That afternoon started like any other, a routine patrol along the settlement's eastern boundary. Jae-won carried her lightweight scanning device, occasionally stopping to check rock formations or unusual plant growths. The colony's survival depended on understanding this alien world, and she took her unofficial scouting missions seriously. Something caught her eye, a strange shimmer in the rocky terrain, something that didn't belong. Unlike the typical cautious colonists who feared the unknown, Jae-won's curiosity burned bright. She moved closer, her step careful but determined. The creature lay partially hidden behind a cluster of crystalline rocks, its body a mix of metallic and organic textures that seemed to shift and breathe. It wasn't like anything she'd seen in the colony's scientific databases. Dark blue-green liquid, possibly blood, pooled around its form, indicating serious injury. Most colonists would have radioed the security team or kept their distance. But Jae-won saw something different. In the creature's eyes barely open, she recognized something familiar. Pain, fear, and a desperate hope for survival. "Hey," she whispered, approaching slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien, who would later introduce himself as Kiro, made a soft, low sound. It wasn't a threat, but something closer to a whimper. His body was covered in what looked like advanced protective gear, now torn and damaged. Multiple puncture marks suggested he'd been in a serious conflict. Jae-won knew the colony's strict protocols. Any unknown alien was to be reported immediately. The traumatic history of first contact had made humans extremely cautious. But something in her heart told her this creature needed help, not another confrontation. She pulled out her emergency medical kit, a habit her father insisted she always carry. The basic supplies were meant for human use, but she understood biological principles well enough to know that cleaning a wound was universal. As she moved closer, Kiro's eyes, 3 of them, positioned in a triangular formation, watched her, with an intensity that was both frightening and mesmerizing. They weren't the cold, calculating eyes of a predator, but those of something intelligent and wounded. "You're safe," Jae-won said, her voice steady. "I'm going to help you." Her hands, small but steady, began cleaning the visible wounds. Kiro didn't resist. If anything, he seemed relieved, as if he'd been running for so long that simple kindness felt like a miracle. The setting sun painted the alien landscape in deep oranges and purples, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. In this moment, a young human girl and a wounded alien creature formed an unlikely connection. Neither, knowing how profoundly this encounter would change everything. Jae-won didn't see a monster or a potential threat. She saw a living being in pain, someone who needed help. And on this distant colony world where survival meant everything, compassion would prove to be the most powerful survival skill of all. Little did she know, the story about to unfold would challenge everything her colony believed about aliens, about survival, and about the true meaning of friendship. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? Part 2. Hidden Sanctuary, Expanded Narrative, The Abandoned Storage. She'd stood at the edge of the colony's maintenance zone, a forgotten structure that most settlers avoided. Its metal walls were covered in layers of dust and tiny scratches from sandstorms, making it the perfect hidden sanctuary. Jae-won knew every secret spot around the settlement, a skill she'd developed from years of exploring and avoiding adult supervision. Carefully she helped Kiro inside, her small frame working hard to support the injured alien's weight. The shed was cramped, filled with old equipment and discarded mining supplies. Broken communication devices and worn-out protective suits created a makeshift nest where Kiro could rest. "Stay quiet," she whispered, positioning him carefully. Her hands moved with surprising confidence, a result of countless first aid classes and her father's survival training. She understood that on a colony world, knowing how to treat injuries could mean the difference between life and death. Kiro's breathing was labored, his body still showing signs of severe trauma. The advanced protective gear he wore seemed to have its own healing mechanisms, with small metallic patches that pulsed with a soft blue light. Jae-won had never seen technology like this up close. Using the medical kit from her backpack, she began cleaning his wounds. Each movement was gentle, calculated. She'd treated her share of injuries, from her father's work-related cuts to her own adventuring mishaps. But this was different. This was an alien life form. "Can you understand me?" she asked softly. Kiro's three-part eyes shifted, focusing on her with an intensity that was both fascinating and slightly unnerving. A series of clicks and low hums emerged from what seemed to be a communication device near his throat. To her surprise, a translated voice followed. Broken, but clear enough. "Refuge," the voice said. "Seeking safety." Jae-won realized this wasn't just an ordinary alien. Kiro was intelligent, scared, and running from something significant. The translation device suggested a complex technological background, far more advanced than anything in her colony. As hours passed, she learned fragments of his story. Kiro was from a civilization that valued expansion above all else. But he was different. He questioned the constant wars, the destruction of other civilizations. His people saw this as weakness. She saw it as courage. They communicated through a mixture of her careful questions, his translated responses, and shared moments of silence. Jae-won shared her protein bars, watching as Kiro's body slowly absorbed the nutrients. He seemed fascinated by human food, examining each bite with scientific curiosity. Outside, the colony's evening alarm sounded, a standard procedure that tracked resident locations. Jae-won knew she'd have to be careful. Her parents would be worried, and colony security was strict about unauthorized activities. "Why did you leave?" she asked during one quiet moment. The translation device took a moment, then responded, "Because silence means agreement, and I could not agree." It was a simple statement that carried profound weight. Jae-won understood rebellion. She understood standing up for what was right, even when it meant being alone. As night fell, she created a makeshift bed using old protective suits and mining blankets. Kiro needed rest, and she needed to plan. How could she keep him safe? How could she help him? The shed became their secret world, a small pocket of trust in a universe often defined by conflict and misunderstanding. A young human girl and an alien refugee, united by a moment of unexpected compassion. Outside, the colony continued its routine. Inside the abandoned shed, an extraordinary friendship was beginning to take shape. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? Part 3. Impending Threat. Expanded Narrative. The colony's early warning systems first detected the anomaly 3 standard days after Jae-won had hidden Kiro in the abandoned storage shed. It started as a faint electromagnetic disturbance, barely a blip on the long-range scanners, but enough to make the colony's security team nervous. Jae-won's father, a senior geological researcher, was the first to notice something was wrong. During the morning briefing, his voice carried an unusual tension. "We've got an unusual energy signature approaching the outer solar system," he told the colony's leadership council. In the hidden shed, Kiro's body went completely still. The translation device at his throat began to emit a low, continuous hum, a sound that made Jae-won's skin crawl. She understood without words they were coming for him. "Who's coming?" she whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for the emergency communication device in her pocket. Kiro's response was immediate and terrifying. "My people. They do not forgive. They do not stop." The colony's defensive systems were designed for planetary protection, simple laser cannons, automated tracking systems, and a network of orbital sensors. They were adequate for minor space debris and the occasional asteroid, but against a truly advanced warship, they were nothing more than children's toys against a military tank. As the hours passed, the threat became more real. Colony sensors showed a massive ship entering the solar system, its design unlike anything humans had ever encountered. It wasn't just a warship, it was a technological marvel that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. J1 knew they had. Limited options. The colony could evacuate, but that would mean certain death for those too slow or unable to escape. Running wasn't a solution. It was a death sentence. "We need a plan," she told Kiro, her young face set with determination. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. Kiro began explaining the weaknesses of his own civilization's technology, the very systems now bearing down on their small colony. His three-part eyes mapped out complex technological vulnerabilities that would take human researchers years to understand. J1's mind worked differently. Where Kiro saw complex technological systems, she saw opportunity. Mining equipment, communication arrays, defensive networks. Things others saw as simple tools, she saw as potential weapons. "We can use what we have," she said, spreading out colony maps and technical schematics. Not fight them directly, but outsmart them. The abandoned storage shed became a war room. Kiro's advanced knowledge combined with J1's creative problem-solving created something entirely new. They weren't just preparing a defense. They were designing a survival strategy that challenged everything both humans and Kiro's civilization understood about warfare. Outside, the massive ship continued its approach. Colony sensors showed its impossible speed, its terrifying technology. Inside the shed, a young girl and an alien refugee worked with a single purpose: survival. The colony had no idea that their fate now rested in the hands of an unlikely pair, a 12-year-old human girl and a refugee alien who had chosen compassion over destruction. As the ship drew closer, time became their most critical weapon. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the narrative? Part 4. Unlikely Defenders. Expanded Narrative. The colony's maintenance yard looked like a graveyard of forgotten technology. Massive mining robots stood silent, their industrial frames covered in layers of dust and rust. Old communication towers leaned at odd angles, their solar panels cracked and weathered. Most settlers saw junk. J1 and Kiro saw something else entirely: a lifeline. "We'll need to rewire everything," J1 muttered, her hands moving quickly across the old equipment. She'd always been good with machines, spending countless hours helping her father repair geological survey equipment. But this was different. This was survival. Kiro's translation device hummed with complex calculations. His three-part eyes scanned each piece of equipment, revealing hidden potential that no human engineer had ever imagined. Mining lasers became precision targeting systems. Communication relays transformed into advanced sensor networks. What seemed like outdated technology became a sophisticated defense mechanism. The colony's leadership was skeptical, and that was putting it mildly. "A 12-year-old girl and an alien refugee are going to save us?" Commander Park argued during an emergency meeting. His weathered face showed years of colonial hardship, and trust didn't come easily. J1's father stepped forward. "My daughter understands systems better than most of our senior engineers," he said quietly, "and Kiro's technology is beyond anything we've ever seen." Modifications began quietly at first. Each night, J1 would sneak out to the maintenance yard, with Kiro guiding her through impossible technological transformations. Old mining robots were reconnected with alien circuitry. Communication towers received impossible upgrades that seemed to defy human understanding. The key was adaptability. Kiro explained that his civilization's technology was rigid, designed for specific purposes. Human technology, by contrast, was beautifully chaotic. It could be reimagined, repurposed, rebuilt in ways no advanced civilization would consider. "Humans see potential where others see limitations," Kiro's translation device explained during one late-night modification session. As the alien warship drew closer, tension in the colony became unbearable. Some wanted to evacuate, others wanted to fight conventionally. But J1 and Kiro's plan offered something different, a chance to survive by being smarter, not just stronger. The final modifications happened with hours to spare. Mining robots now moved with impossible precision. Communication towers could now detect and redirect energy weapons. What was once industrial equipment became a living, breathing defensive network. Commander Park watched in disbelief as test systems came online. The old maintenance yard, once considered a graveyard of forgotten technology, now hummed with an energy that felt almost alive. "It shouldn't work," he muttered, watching holographic displays show impossible defensive calculations. But it did work, and everyone knew it. The approaching alien warship represented centuries of technological advancement, precise, powerful, uncompromising. But it was about to face something it had never encountered before: human creativity combined with an outsider's perspective. Jaewon looked at Kiro, a smile breaking through her concentrated expression. They weren't just defending a colony. They were proving that survival wasn't about the biggest weapons, but about the most adaptable minds. The final countdown began. The alien ship was minutes away. Everything they had designed, everything they had modified, was about to be tested. Would you like me to continue with the final part of the narrative? Part 5. Redemption. Expanded narrative. The alien warship entered. New Horizons' atmosphere like a nightmare made real. Its massive structure blocked out the sky, casting enormous shadows across the rocky landscape. Every colonist watched in terrified silence, expecting total destruction. But destruction never came. Instead, the modified mining robots, now transformed into a complex defensive network, began their remarkable response. What looked like simple industrial machines moved with impossible precision. Communication towers that once seemed obsolete now projected energy fields that danced around the approaching ship like living barriers. Jaewon stood beside Kiro in the colony's central control room, her small frame rigid with concentration. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, making micro-adjustments faster than the colony's most experienced technicians. "Target identified," she whispered, redirecting energy signatures. The alien warship's advanced weapons seemed to bend and twist, their devastating potential neutralized by the improvised defense system. It was like watching a sophisticated dance of technology, human creativity versus alien precision. Kairo's translation device hummed softly. "Remarkable," it translated his thoughts. "Your species sees connections where others see boundaries. Within hours, the impossible happened. The massive warship, a symbol of technological superiority, began to retreat. Not destroyed, but completely outmaneuvered by a colony's makeshift defense system. Designed by a 12-year-old girl and a refugee alien, the colony erupted in celebration. Commander Park, who had initially been the most skeptical, approached Jaewon with unexpected emotion. "You saved us," he said, his weathered hand placing a commendation medal on her jacket. But the true victory wasn't just about defeating an alien threat. It was about something deeper: understanding, cooperation, and hope. Kiro's status changed from potential threat to honored guest. The colony's researchers were fascinated by his knowledge, but more importantly, they saw him as a person. Not an alien to be feared, but an individual who had chosen compassion over destruction. "I no longer have a home," Kiro's device translated during a colony meeting, "but perhaps I can help build one here." Jaewon's parents watched their daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. The shy, curious girl who had always seen the world differently had just saved an entire colony. Her ability to connect, to understand, to imagine possibilities where others saw only limitations, these were her true strengths. Weeks after the incident, New Horizon became something unique. A colony that had learned to look beyond fear, to see potential in the unexpected. Kiro began teaching advanced technological concepts. Jaewon continued exploring, her reputation growing as a young innovator. Their friendship became a symbol of something powerful, the idea that understanding could overcome any barrier: species, technology, fear. These were just words. What mattered was connection, compassion, and the willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes. As the colony's first sunset after the invasion painted the rocky landscape in deep oranges and purples, Jaewon and Kiro stood together. Two beings from completely different worlds, united by a moment of unexpected courage. The universe, they realized, was far more interesting when you chose to understand rather than to fear. Would you like me to elaborate on any part of this narrative?